Welcome to the Squad Games Podcast. Squad Games Podcast.
What have you guys been doing in the hobby lately?
Me personally, making terrain. That's
You and
all I
me
do. Yeah.
Yeah. How about you, Elliot?
Yeah, I was gathering a couple pieces of the scatter terrain that we needed to expand the set for LVO, and then just been gaming a little bit. I'm trying to think. The last hobby-related kill team I've worked on was doing a World Eater Seam Legionnaire. I've got one, so.
But you do a lot of AOS, right? What is the army that you're currently painting?
Just finishing up a Slaves to Darkness project that I've been running since, I don't know, maybe January this year. Just trying to finish it up, and I'll probably play with that for the next 12 months or so.
Cool. And Behnz, what is your, what terrain are you building?
Honestly, I've just picked up some old Imperial Cities terrain. I've also got probably 6 sets of Sector Imperialis here, Chalnath, that I'm just getting really creative with, and creating some buildings that'll actually provide heavy but not be things like crates and so forth. So it'll look very thematic.
Oh,
That's
very
been
nice.
My focus, yeah.
Your now, are these old, these are like the Cities of Death sprues outside of the your sector, your Chalnath stuff?
Yeah, correct. So like the old Manufactorum and those styles of buildings. Yeah. So I'm a big fan of those. And honestly, they're for the theme for the kind of Ashes of Faith board I'm putting together. Yeah.
Okay. Nice. And are you making like a narrative board, or is this like...
It'll be a competitive board. Like, people can use it for narrative, don't get me wrong, and they're more than welcome to, but the focus will be like a competitive board in theme with a box release.
Oh, nice. Okay, cool. Yeah, well, I'm Dakotah, and this is the Squad Games Podcast. Today we have Behnz from Australia, and we have Elliot Miller, who is another TO for LVO. And today we're here to talk about TO tips, tricks, and the Australian scene. So I know Australia goes under the radar quite a lot. What is your last tournament you ran, and how big was it?
Oh, look, the last tournament I ran was something I dubbed Kill Team Filthy Casuals, KTFC, and we had about 16 players, nice. Which were Sydney-centric. One gentleman came down from the ACT, which is a state inside New South Wales, and it was a really strong tournament in terms of the competitive players that turned up, and those are going to be run every second month. So that's a theme we're going to be ensuring continues for those competitive players.
Awesome. And you said that you ran a GT or a major actually recently, and do you want to tell us about that, and when was that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So we, after the largest ITC event, we ran in January on Australia Day here with one of the partnering stores, the Combat Company, which attracted about 28 signups and 26 attendees on the day.
That's end of January, right?
That was end of January, yep. Mm-hmm. Yep, that's correct. That's around the 25th. In March, following that, because that was my first tournament that I ran, and it was due to there just not being anything on a large scale happening, and that's obviously due to a number of things, resources and so forth. But post that in March, we ran our very first grand tournament. So there were 40 signups, 38 attending on the day with a couple of apologies, but that was a phenomenal event. We held that over in Padstow, so we needed a location obviously bigger than what a store could supply us. And that was a phenomenal event. Like, everybody had a really good time. It was 4 rounds. It was at an RSL. So here we've got, like, for service people, there's like clubs and so forth, with bistros, etc. inside, where you can get food and drink and everything like that. And we held it at that location, and we just ran it more like an event rather than a tournament. And it was really well received. So I think we had about $2,600 in prize pool. We got a couple of really good sponsorships. I was very fortunate through work. We were able to get some prizes donated as well. So it worked out really well, and there was something in it for everyone. Dakotah, you and I have had a chat before, and you mentioned you try and keep it, available to everyone, something in it for everyone. That's exactly what we did.
It's awesome. Yeah. I'm going to act dumb a lot of this time, just so you know. Like we haven't talked before, so I can ask you some of the same engaging questions.
No, I have some actual questions too, just like because I don't know. But so, I think that like probably the two of the themes that we can touch on is that like the two biggest hurdles behind being a tournament organizer is probably the venue and the terrain. So, we can talk more terrain, I think, later, and we'll have plenty of time for that. But how did getting that venue work out? Did you guys have to put like a deposit down? How did the dynamic work with them? Like, did it work out? Because, it can be so expensive to rent some venues, and then other venues, if you're creative, you can get them for like a fraction if you can, have patrons that are going to buy drinks and buy food and stuff like that. So how did that part work out? Because that sounds like a really great place to have a venue. And, it's just sometimes, you have to, as like a little TO group, get some money together to have a deposit if that's the type of thing that you have to do. So sorry, just take it from there.
Yeah, no stress whatsoever. And look, you're 100% right on that. Making sure that you've got a venue locked in, obviously, is key. And then making sure you've got the resources to be able to pull it together, because there's so many moving components, as you both know. But we did talk to the venue and state that we had X amount of people turning up. And obviously, it's a venue where you can't bring your own food and drink in. So there was an incentive, or I guess an element of encouragement for the patrons to actually source food and drink from the location, and that was definitely a key factor for them to provide us with a little bit of a discount, not too much. Hiring a venue, because it was in like an auditorium as well, which was a really nice big space for us, and provided people not eating each other's elbows when they were playing, etc., next to each other. So it was nice, really well spaced out, and location that provided not only a table for a board, but a table for all the kit that everybody needed as well. So it was twice the length of what you'd see normally in like a game store, etc. So it worked out really well. But yeah, we kind of between understanding what we needed in terms of a location and kind of being able to pre-sell tickets made it work. Because as I said, back in January, we had an initial crack at it, a go at creating a tournament, and the response from that was huge. So we had some confidence to actually go in there and create a GT, and yeah, it was really evident that, number one, we needed one. Number two, everybody from different elements of the game, people who had only played 6 games were excited to come be a part of it, because it was the first, and we kind of flagged it as the first. And, you had the really competitive guys there as well. But the response from everybody, playing with everyone is, on that day, everybody made lots of friends. They found it really, really well organized and well run. Because as you probably both know, making sure people stick to time is a bit of a challenge. And we had a decent break there for lunch where people could sit down and eat and have a choice of meals. So, yeah, thankfully, with some really good prep work and some understanding of what everybody wanted, we were able to really, kick it out of the park, which was exciting.
Yeah, so it is fantastic. So I definitely want to touch up on a lot of those, a lot more of that. I want to go in a specific order, though. I almost like when we're going to talk about our tips and tricks here, things that we know of. And gaining insight from Behnz and ourselves, kind of like the thought process of how we would be starting a tournament from like, let's say us 3 banded together and we wanted to start a tournament. What would we start to do? And then we would kind of go through back and forth and talk about some of those points. So, for instance, we would want to talk about, like, firstly, what kind of event are we going to look at? Are we going to look at like when you're developing an event, you're going to say, do I want to run a grand tournament? Do I want to run a normal tournament to get my feet wet? Do I want to run and then that's going to be able to dictate where and what you want to do from there. Right. So,
and almost before that, even how do you know if you want to become a TO? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, Behnz, it sounds like you're new to this. And, we've maybe all got a story how we got in, but like, how did you you're recent to like being an event organizer, right? So like how did it become you? You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely. That's a great question.
Sure. Look, so from organizing actual hobbying events, I'm very new. I'm probably like 3 tournaments in. But organizing actual events, I'm fortunate enough to be outside of the hobby side of things, working for a company where we do events regularly. So I did reach out to a group of people who I work with on a regular basis and ask them, how should I go about this? And the first thing they said is you need a plan and you need to start hyping it up in the first instance. So even though from a TO perspective, I was very green, ensuring that people knew something was about to happen. And I guess it's different here in Australia because our scene is very new, very fresh, where I think it's a lot more mature over in the States. So you've got a player base that's keen and hungry to get in amongst events. We're here in Australia, if we don't execute properly, I don't think we'll get that great a turnout. So building the hype and I guess making sure the community was aware of it was the first thing from my perspective that I had to execute effectively on.
And it's interesting to me too that you seem to jump off like in the deep end. Like you went for a GT. Like, had you ever thought of like organizing anything local at the store level, or like does your community have regular 8, 10, 12 player events like on Saturdays that people can just show up to and kind of have like that 3-4 round experience, or is that is that not normal in your community?
Yeah, no. So before that, and sorry, I was just sticking to the topic of the actual tournament, but about a year before the tournament, so we actually did a lot of community legwork. So there was a couple of Facebook groups that were organized along with a Discord that started off really fledgling that we've now got, I think, about 700 players in across Australia. But we actually went around teaching people how to play Kill Team. So I got into Kill Team probably around when Octarius was launched, and I bought the box and I had no one to play with. And then I went out to another gaming store and connected with a few people and realized there were a couple of people here and there that were playing Kill Team. From going around to maybe about 6 locations around Sydney, just focusing on New South Wales for the moment, we started teaching pockets of people how to play. And I brought on people who I connected with around the scene. And we ran things like community days where, to your point, Elliot, there was those little, days of about 8 hours where people could play multiple games against each other and welcome new people into the fold, and where people could get an intro game and get excited about, finally fielding their minis. And then a year later, I think in New South Wales alone, we've got close to about 420 people now playing. So a lot of the legwork in getting the community up and running prior to that was essentially, if we hadn't put in the groundwork, and massive shout out to the guys in New South Wales who helped carry some of those locations. But if we hadn't had that groundwork in place, there wouldn't have been a tournament, because the player base was essentially zero, or visibility of it was zero.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm on the Australian Discord now, and it's massive. It's really surprising how big it actually is. So what you said is also very similar to my story, but also a tad different. So Sheldon Steer, which is the previous TO of LVO before me, SoCal Open and BAO, he used to run a lot of the tournaments, and Elliot was pretty much the only guy to help him out at LVO. Everyone else kind of wanted to play, including myself. And then he ended up wanting to pass the torch on and not TO anymore for various reasons. And he thought I'd be a good fit because I already make terrain, I make a lot of tokens, so on and so forth for the game itself. And I actually have a way to possibly like make money back. Unfortunately, in Sheldon's aspect, it was just kind of like a black hole of debt, right? And that happens to most tournament organizers. And that's something that we're going to talk about today and try to make sure that people don't make those same mistakes, or if they do, they know what they're doing or why they're doing it, right? To be financially responsible.
And just to be clear, we're on great standings with Sheldon, and he still comes to LVO, and he's going to be staffed this year. He was also involved in the Kill Team Open, so that was the tournaments were a month apart. So doing both was a big commitment for him.
Absolutely.
So there's no like bad blood or anything, and he's still like one of the main shareholders, I guess, of the organization. You know,
absolutely. So. When you think of Sheldon, he's been on the podcast a couple times. He's a great dude, and I don't think he gets enough credit for what he did in the scene and what he's done for me personally. And I look up to him and how much fun I had at his events, and I try to make sure that I pass that on to everyone who comes to squad game events. So from there, when Sheldon was like, "Yo, do you want to do LVO?" and I was like, "Let me talk to my wife." And then she said yes. So from there, FLG, which we are affiliates for, back in the day, there was no affiliates. So there was no real way for us to make money at LVO, and it was just a black hole. And ultimately, like as a TO, if I'm trying to do this like full time, I have to try and find a way to also provide for my family or employees or any staff, be able to at least pay their way or pay food and stuff like that. So, with that, I had to come up with a plan. And also I didn't want to go into like LVO with no practice or, one of my biggest goals was to create, and still is to create, some of the best layouts, competitive layouts, for Kill Team that is balanced and good for everyone. So, we started a tournament circuit where we would go out every single week. We would go out to a different game store in Los Angeles or the surrounding area, try and find new Kill Team players, put them all into the same Discord, people that were interested in going to tournaments, and start to build up a small scene. And we started off with 7 players at the first Squad Games tournament. And I kind of pitched the All Valley Team tournament last year as the biggest tournament, and and it worked. We went from 7 all the way up to 42 players in like I think it was 6 months, and that was just from going to different stores every single week, meeting with different people, playing games.
So, just curious, Dakotah, was 7 the attendance at yours first event or the first small tournament? Was that your annual like turnover, or from like the first one you did just building up?
That was from the very first tournament we ever ran, and that was in June of last year. And this is Kill Team has such an insane growth, and that's why I'm excited for Behnz. You're going to start to see some crazy stuff happen, because when I would always talk about the All Valley while going and running different tournaments, and we were having like 10, 12, 14, seeing small growth of numbers, right? And then we had a tournament where we had 19 players at SoCal Open last year, which was like, I was like, oh yeah, this is huge. This is so many people, right? And then we ran the All Valley and 45 people showed up, or 42 people. And I was like, oh, this is bigger than LVO. This is huge. And we had a blast, but that's because I pitched it the entire year. And this year, I mean, I think we're already sitting at 45, and we still have 2 months. We still have 2 months of people to sign up. So
for the AVTT All Valley tournament, you have 45 tickets sold. That's excellent, man.
Correct.
And just what did you say it was last year?
42.
Okay, great. So you're already ahead. And I don't know what you guys have found to be the trend, but it seems like what we had observed previously at LVO is that there was a decent amount of people, because our events tended not to sell out because we tend to have like extra
Kill Team
capacity.
has never sold out. Not once.
So there's not like an urgency like some other types of like Games Workshop tournaments, like for 40K or Age of Sigmar, for example.
They're both
LVO
already
sold out.
Yeah.
So I noticed have people buy tickets later because there's not that FOMO effect as much. You know what I mean? So we comfortably see maybe like a 25 like ticket sales in the last, I don't know,
month.
Yeah, something like that. That's just my anecdotal observation. But
so all players kind of know and understand that last month of waiting for a TO is really difficult on tournament organizers. And the reason why it's difficult for us is because we don't know how much terrain we need. We don't know how much prize support we need. And a lot of these big events, like the small events here and here, the monthly things, cool. You're always going to probably bring the same amount of prize support, the same this, the same that. But like at these big events, the more time a TO or a group of staff has to plan for this event, it helps, right? So getting tickets, buying tickets earlier, also pushing out tickets earlier is always better. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. LVO this year, it was the biggest tournament in North America. At 87 players showed up. We sold 100 tickets and we sold out 2 months beforehand. And we had to continue. There was like 15 top players that didn't buy their tickets early. So they all couldn't go. So I asked FLG if we could get more tickets. They said yes. And it sold out again in 30 seconds. And then we did it again and again, and we sold 100 tickets. And, it's an exciting thing because firstly, it's never happened. And secondly, my very first tournament of this season sold out 3 weeks before the event actually happened. Right. So I think that and then, a lot of people got left out once again. So remember to try and buy your tickets early because it helps out the TOs. But that actually leads us into our next talking point, which is how do we as tournament organizers effectively communicate important information to participants before, during, and how do you guys put out this stuff into the warp and how people can hear about these tournaments, especially in Australia?
Like promoting them, like how do we? I don't know. Like, it seems like the highest retention happens through Discord, and that the people have like really good engagement through there, and that Facebook has like really high numbers in some of these groups, but it doesn't have like a high like click through rate in terms of like people that see your event or like end up being like a tournament player and attend your event. You know what I mean? Where
Correct.
I feel like once you have people on the Discord, the community becomes like a lot more tight knit, and like the level of enthusiasm and stuff just builds, and then people are more likely to hear about what other people are doing because Behnz, I don't know about for your event, but like even for something like LVO, like traditionally there's not like advertising for it like in a traditional sense. Like there's usually not a lot of like ads taken out. Like usually I think it spreads through knowing somebody who goes to that event, and then it's like if it's your friend that does it, you're like way more likely to get like roped in. But that's like how I found out about like half the tournaments that I go to, like before the internet was like such a presence. But I'm not sure like how you create those connections to bring people in where they show up and aren't intimidated by like a competitive event or what that entails,
Yeah, no, definitely. Look, from my perspective, it was all about ensuring that all the stores their own Facebook groups. Like we printed out material, we stuck it up on notice boards, and we essentially built a community. And what I've realized about Facebook is there's a particular like demographic or a particular age of person that prefers Facebook over Discord. And here we've got a very wide age demographic. I think our oldest player was pushing 60, and I think our youngest player was 21. So there was a wide, varied age demographic, and like I said, we not only promoted the hell out of it in store and community Facebook groups, but we also spent a lot of time building our own Discord, and then sharing it in there and making sure people, in some instances, we actually, reached out to specific people and said, hey, did you know this is happening? And they went out and told their own, little pockets of groups as well. So word of mouth was super important, communicating through Discord and through Facebook groups. And look, our Facebook groups here are a little bit more of a community notice board. Like I said, in New South Wales, in Victoria, up in far north Queensland, as well as Brisbane and Western Australia. So we've got actual Facebook groups for each state and each major city. We've got like people who kind of run those and run their own community, and not for the, not for the anything, but for the love of, wanting to grow their own community and get more people into the scene. So there are people, and this is what's really important as well about running an event like this, is having people around you or a team who can assist and at least get the word out is super key as well. So across all Facebook groups, across Discord, word of mouth conversations, games throughout the week that were being played, people were being told, and that was, I think, really key in making sure the first GT was a success.
Absolutely. I think that anyone that's listening, if you're looking to run a tournament, the best thing to do is to get people face to face. You're much more likely, as like a sales pitch, you're much more likely to convince somebody to come to your event face to face rather than them reading something online, if they even see it. That them seeing you and how much they like you is such a huge, important factor in retaining tournament players, because tournament players are different than normal players. And then you as a TO have to convince those normal players that Kill Team is not like 40K, because 40K has a stigma about them being so super sweaty. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't really think it is. I just think that's the stigma, or the reason why people quote unquote leave 40K is because they had some bad experiences. But I can tell you that people have had bad experiences in Kill Team, right? So the second most important thing as a TO is at your tournaments, ensure that all your players are having a good time, right? Because the next important thing is to retain those players. Because if you run a tournament, cool, maybe you got 20 people, and if none of them show up to the next event, I mean, something happened, right? Something wrong happened.
I mean, I think the retention is just natural if the event goes as good as you imagine it. But, there's obviously a lot of obstacles. But I think if things go, like if you're like, I'm a TO, this is the event I want to have, and like you like live it out, that I think you'll get a lot of people that come back just by it being a success. But there's a lot of things that can go wrong, obviously, right? Like there's a million
absolutely.
things. Like 1 year before LVO, Sheldon was driving a trailer full of all of the terrain and got like a flat tire in California when he has to be like in Las Vegas the next day. Stuff like that, you know what I mean? And like you can't plan for that. And it could have been more severe than that. Yeah. So, I agree though that like it's such a risk if like not retaining somebody, because like that's like your best client is somebody that's already like seen your brand, made that connection with you face to face, and you kind of like represent that as being a TO. You know what I mean? It is that interpersonal connection that represents it. But I think we all love the hobby so much that if like things go well, it's just like people will like, you'll make them like somebody that wants to go to that every year then. And I think that's where you can really, really succeed is, we have people like that at LVO that have like been there for like 4 years, 5 years. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that Discord is a fabulous resource. Facebook is a fabulous resource. But like Behnz said, like you did 140 teaching games. You retained some of those people to go to that 40-person event, right? Or they met you and then those friends, and then they got their friends or their buddies or, their family, their D&D group to learn and then to come. It's all about spreading the community in a positive way. And it's much more, so it's kind of like this. I look at, if anyone plays Dungeons and Dragons, it's almost like how I started was when somebody is like, I don't want to DM anymore. Right. And then you put on the shoes, you're like, all right, I guess I'll DM. And then you get stuck in that DM shoes, right? Like now you are the dungeon master because you did such a good job, but your friends enjoy it so much. It's very similar, right?
And that would be like my TO origin story. It was like, why did you do it? It was like, well, there was no tournament at that time, so I did it. And if I didn't, if it had existed, I would have just played in it. You know what I mean? But here I am, and it's 5 years later, and I do love it, But I only did it because there was nobody doing it at that time.
You started in the last edition, right?
Yeah. So the original Kill Team was released in 2018. LVO is held in January every year, so it would have been like the 2018 season, but in 2019, as far as the ITC is concerned, and that was the first year. And then, we did have it in 2020 in January ahead of the pandemic, and missed 2021, but we've had it every year since 2019. Yep.
I was literally the same way it happened to me. Nobody else was doing it, and there was a massive gap, and the community was at a point where it needed to come together, and bam, there I was.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an important point, is that you may be the person listening to this in the community where you're like, I know we have a lot of demand, we got a lot of people, we got a lot of good grassroots stuff happening, but somebody has to like kind of self-identify, because nobody like appointed any of us, like, right? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
I think we all stepped forward and like kind of chose ourselves to do this, because it's necessary to have these conventions and these events that we love so much. Somebody has to do it. And so, if you sense that your community is on the cusp, you might have to step forward and be that person who steps up and starts having the 20, 30 player events, in your town, if nobody's already doing that. And if somebody is, it helps to share the burden and have these organizations. Van's just curious, how many folks do you have on staff for your event? Like how many?
Look, honestly, I ran it by myself. I ran, so the first one we did with, I can hear you chuckling there, Dakotah. So the first one was run with a store, where the store essentially provided the space. I provided the boards and the terrain, and they ran the event. This is the Australia Day event with the Combat Company. And I turned up with the terrain, and I ran the event and set up all the rounds and so forth. For the GT, I literally ran it by myself and a friend of mine who came on the day. But a massive shout out to Screech and Jay, who literally, because as things tend to go wrong when they shouldn't, but they do. My car had a flat battery the night before, so I was due to go and set this thing up early in the piece, leave the terrain there overnight, and massive shout out to those guys and Sam who came in for 2 hours when I was at my sweatiest trying to get this thing set up. And I'll never forget it, but Jay was sitting there with the Into the Dark terrain, and with the butt of a butter knife, like hammering it in, hammering the sets in, and that vision is forever in my head. And Screech came along as well, and I'll never forget those guys. I was just forever thankful that they were there when I needed it, and helped me get things set up. But it was literally run as light as possible, but thankfully, we'd done a whole lot of pre-planning. I'd made sure everything was locked in and things were running like clockwork. And when situations like that, presented themselves. I had really good mates to come and make sure everything was running okay. So yeah, how big of a team do I have for the events that I'll be running? At the moment, it's literally just myself. But like I said, we've got an amazing group of area leads who will come and help. And there's a couple more people in the community who are putting their hand up. To your point, Elliot, to put on the TO cap, and I've told them, hey, let me know. I'll be there with my terrain. I'll make sure it runs well for you, and making sure that they have the support is key, because that's what encourages momentum. So yeah. At the moment, team-wise, virtually probably about 6, but reality, just myself at the moment.
Yeah, you brought something up in that's, I think, goes unnoticed. If you're listening to this and you don't want to be a TO and you have no interest in ever being a TO, but you still want to help out, some of the most valuable things that a tournament organizer has is volunteer, any kind of effort, right? Like at LVO, we had a couple people show up and help put up some terrain. Afterwards, we had Ben Cash, his kid, and a few other people, a whole bunch of people actually, help us take down terrain and put stuff away. And that is so invaluable. And now let's say like there's like 12, 24 people, like my last tournament, Jonathan Marquise, TJ Freeman, a bunch of other people like helped us put things away. But like, that is so helpful, because as a TO, like, yeah, players are playing the entire day, but the TO's brains are going just as much. And they probably woke up earlier. They probably got there earlier, and then they have to drive home, and then they have to put it all away, or they leave it in the car for the next morning, depending on where they live. I know Sheldon couldn't leave anything in his car because he lives in Oakland.
He left the whole streaming rig packed on the back of his Prius
in
the valet parking at Las Vegas overnight. No! So he had his whole tens of thousands of dollars in streaming equipment, probably. But anyway,
I think that's something else that's important, right? Is I know for a fact, Behnz, that if you ever start to stream tournaments, you won't be able to do it by yourself. So if that's ever on your key to do, you'll probably have to pick up at least 1 to 2 people to help out for those kinds of things. I find a head TO could probably TO a 40 to 60 person event by himself, but that would be very tiring and difficult. Most squad game events, we have 3 people helping. And LVO, we're going to have 7 this year, which is way better than 4.
Yeah, we had 4 last year, and it was...
and we had a stream going. It was rough.
Yeah, so the stream is just an interesting discussion. I think that the stream, because like nice streaming stuff is expensive, and there's not so many kill team events like continuously that you could just like stream every weekend, at this point, that the streaming is like hard to like make profitable, right? But it is really great advertising, I think, for your event. So it's kind of like a loss leader, but it adds a lot of visibility. But it probably takes 2 staff members to add something like that to an event, wouldn't you say? Is that what we have planned?
Yeah, at LVO, we have 2 experienced people this year. Last year, it was like me and Giacomo with a half-brained idea, and that we practiced some in my office, and it worked. But we had technical issues day 1, technical issues day 2, and day 3 we had it set and ready to go, mostly because of the help of Sheldon. So when you add streaming, it adds a lot to your event. But here's the thing, not all venues can get there. We'll talk about venues in a second, but I think that's something that's super important to remember, that if you are going to stream something, now you could just get a Mevo cam and stream from your phone onto Twitch, and that's like super easy. You know what I mean? If you're going to go for more of a professional vibe or professional look, you could even just do like a stream from your phone. right?
Like a gimbal and an iPhone. Yeah, like a newer iPhone. Like, because the thing is, our table is a lot smaller, so I think it's a lot easier for the lens of an iPhone to take it in versus like a 6x4 40K table or whatever they plan now.
Yeah, but then you have to give up your phone, and then what are you going to do for BCP? So there is some things that you have to like, and then you don't have your phone for the day. Like there is definitely some things that you have to think about. Like maybe if you have an extra phone, or you like buy a phone and then expense it out in your taxes, stuff like that. So there's and then that's a super easy thing, because you could just get like one of those overhead camera things, and you just zone it in, and you're good to go. So something is better than nothing, but if you're just streaming from a phone, you also will never be able to reply to your stream either, so
yeah, unless you have multiple devices. But maybe some people have I think Sheldon keeps some of his old phones and then can like dedicate them to that, so his like main phone isn't taken away. But yeah. I mean, it's an option.
Yeah, this year we're going to have 3 cameras. We're going to have, at least 3 cameras plus plus a Rode mic 2 set and a few other things to help us out. But structuring tournaments, that is a very interesting question and doesn't get talked about a lot. A lot of people play Swiss. Some people do brackets. Some people do top cuts. Some people just do pure Swiss. What is the preferred way to do it in Australia? Behnz?
Standard Swiss at the moment, so everybody's familiar with it. Like I said, the scene's just starting up, and I guess that's the expectation. Every time there's a tournament in New South Wales or in Victoria, or in Perth, I believe there was one as well. Everybody was just going Swiss, and I think that's the expectation up until we get a broader player base, and then we start thinking about doing other things like pairs of people. I think Swiss is just the standard.
Okay. What I'm interested in is, Elliot, you were, I think, there at the beginning of the kill team scene for LVO. How did the top 8 cut become a thing?
So the first year was a top 4 cut because our numbers, and that's the thing. I think once you are pushing certain numbers in a tournament, that it becomes more viable, right? If you're down to 28, 32 players, you can have a 5-round Swiss paired event and have one true winner, and everything will work itself out. But when you start getting 50, 60 players, so we had I think 30-ish, 32 maybe year one, and it was just something that Frontline Gaming had done. It's a way to not drag everybody through the tournament through all the number of rounds necessarily that aren't in contention for winning it, while still having enough rounds to make sure that there's one winner. And it also makes it a little bit fun because you have to do it based on a mathematical 2 to the nth number to make sure that you have enough rounds. And so usually the tournament organizer will be on the side of having making sure they have enough rounds. So there may be a little pad where if you do take a loss, in the qualification process ahead of the top 8 cut, you can still make it having a loss. You can stay alive and make it. And the top 8 just becomes single elimination at that point, just 1-on-1, right? But it gives people that have lost. One year, Michael T. Holy, he came in and he may have been ranked number 1 in the ITC, and he played Glass Half Dead round 1. Glass beat him in this super tight game.
2020, I think.
Yeah, right, and then he went and won out all the next games with high scores, qualified for the top 8 cut, won out through the top 8, and then took first place by being able to do that. So I think it's fun that you're not one and done at a big event that as well. You know what I mean? That if you score high and stick to it, that you still have a fighting chance. But I can see how it's not necessarily until you reach a certain mass of people, but I do think it's fun, and it's fun if you can have prizes for everybody that makes the top 8 or something.
Yeah.
Or you could do a top 4 at your tournament too if you have a smaller event, and still be okay, everybody gets a little finalist, something memorabilia that they can take home with them, or a little game aid that they can bring with them forward, something like that.
There's another interesting part about top cuts, and this is another bonus, and I'll say the negative afterwards. Another bonus for that is day 2 when the top cut is playing, whether it's 4, whether it's 8, whether it's 16, whatever it may be. The rest of the field can then play in another tournament. And so essentially you can get 2 tournaments for the price of 1 tournament. And at that point in time, all the sharks are out of the pond. Now you might have a chance to win another possibly really big tournament, right? I know that when I played at LVO 2020, that is something I enjoyed, but I was also slightly jaded because I got tied for top 8 and I didn't make it because of strength of schedule. Fuck strength of schedule. Sorry.
I know, dude. And you almost won that GT. And so what he is saying is that, say you have you're going to all right, we're going to have a 2-day tournament and we're going to do maybe you want to do 7 rounds. So you'd have 50 of the people all play together day 1 for 4 rounds. And then you'll say oh, well, the next day, only the top 8 people. So then you leave those 42 other people with the choice of coming back, buying another ticket, playing in another event. And then maybe you run, a tournament that has 4 or 5 rounds on that day or something like that. And,
or you include it in the original ticket price. One of the
you can do that too. Definitely.
Yeah.
You can do it either way. I mean, you can make it a second upsale, if you, for the people that are really enthusiastic, or you can give them incentive to stay around day 2 by packaging it all together. Right. So
I think for some of the bigger tournaments, sometimes it's better to have a secondary ticket to come back for day 2. Because then what if those 40K players at LVO or, Cherokee Open or LSO or ASO or something, some other kind of big tournament, they kind of flunk out and they're like, hey, I'm going to go play Kill Team tomorrow, and then they can come in when you just have it 1 ticket price. Sometimes you lock out those players and then they don't have that opportunity. So when you're thinking of a TO aspect, these are some of the things that you would think. We're going to move into brackets and then we're going to move into final, the full Swiss. So brackets is something that KTO did, something that Nova did, and I am not a big fan of brackets. This is just a personal TO choice.
You said Nova did it as well? Sorry.
Yeah, this is Nova's Kill Team, Nova's general practice. A lot of people love this format, absolutely love it. And they usually have a top 8 cut, but I almost did this at LVO as well. But every single cut, so there's multiple cuts. So 1st through 8, we'll play in a cut. 9 through 16, we'll play in the cut on day 2, right? This is day 2.
So just to step back. So the way that a thing works is that, say you're going to play 8 games over the 2 days in a big tournament. You'd play the first 4 games, and then based on your record, you'd get put into these groupings of people, which kind of becomes your pod, which is kind of your sub tournament for the rest of the tournament. So when he's saying that 1 through 8, it'd probably be all the players that are 4-0 or something close to that, or all the highest ranking, all get placed into the top pod. But then you're limited if you don't get placed in the top pod, you become unable to win the tournament, because the only way you could get first is by making that top pod and then winning that pod. So
yeah, it makes day 1 super, super important. And if you lose day 1, it's why would I come back day 2? But this is why.
Yeah. And is there a threshold you guys would recommend for running this type of format in terms of attendees?
My suggestion to you would be, if you're going to run 4 big events per year, which I would say, if you're going to run, this is general advice to any other TO out there. Let's say you're going to run some big events. Focus your first year on running 1 big event. Focus on year 2 running 2 big events. And then year 3, try to focus on running 1 big event each quarter that does not directly conflict with another large event, right? So in the United States, we would say Nova, any of the GW tournaments, which is very difficult to plan for because GW doesn't like to, say when their tournaments are going to be until February. It's frustrating.
Yeah, to me, their Games Workshop in the United States, for those listeners, they're falling into a trend for me, because winter is packed with LVO. Spring is packed with Adepticon, and then they have kind of a window for like 2 tournaments for Games Workshop in the summer, and then Nova happens like in like the start of September, and then they got space for like 2 more tournaments, which one of them includes their finale. So I think the location and the exact time varies, but they've been kind of falling into that 2 events. Nova happens 2 events, and then it's time for LVO again.
Exactly. So if I would suggest just running one big tournament, multiple small
Behnz,
ones.
were you asking like at which number of player threshold should you consider doing something more than just pure?
Yeah, that's
Yes.
correct.
Or
yeah, that's correct.
So what my final point is that you run your first event all Swiss, run your second event brackets, run your third event top 8, so on and so forth, and you change up this format of the tournaments because it adds a different flair. It adds a reason to come, right? If every event is just pure Swiss, it gets boring, in my opinion. So you can advertise, hey, this is a bracketed tournament, and this is why you'd come to it. This is the top 8 cut. You know, everyone's going to try to be that top 8, you know, so on and so forth. So for a cutoff for numbers, I would say that you'd start to look at these things at 40 players. If you want to change or add in a top 8, I would say 40 players would be it. If you're going to do brackets, you could do 2-day tournament and do pods of 4. So you do 4 games day 1, 2 games day 2.
In bands, have your events tended to be 2 days? Like the one that you were describing, or some of them one day? Because I think when you go to a thing where you're having people there for like a Saturday and a Sunday, then you definitely open up to like, okay, one day everybody plays, and then the next day we either do like brackets or top 8 or what have you, you know,
or pure Swiss.
Yeah. Look, I think at this stage it's only just been one day, but I think moving forwards we're going to have the opportunity to run a 2-day event. Fingers crossed.
That 2-day is when you'd start to look at some fun formats.
Yeah, because I mean, I don't think it's bad that we can run a great event on one day though. Like 40K is limited. Like if you want to get 6 games in and have like 64 people and have one winner, it takes full 2 days. Like that's playing 3 games on a Sunday and how late that goes, you know? So the fact that we can have a whole grand tournament, and you know, if you can play 5 or 6 games in a day or whatever you're willing to push the community to, I think anything is possible. I guess we're seeing like time going longer though in this new edition, right? And we've kind of gone the reverse. What's the number that you guys would be capped at, Behnz, for what's the most you run people through in a tournament in one day?
Well, I think 40 people at this stage.
How many rounds? Because Spain does 5.
We do
Spain's
4.
Wild. 4?
We do 4. We do 4 in one day. There was talks around running 5 rounds in one day, and the feedback from the community was just like, I can't get a leave pass that's that long for one day from the partner. So we've just got to be conscious of that as well. Because look, here again, we need to, my focus over the next 12 months is to grow the player base a bit more, welcome more people in, try and steal some people from 40K. To your point, Dakotah, you know, bring them over to a game system that's not only allows you to play a game in a lunch break, but also encourages you to, you know, diversify and not have an initial outlay on an army that might cost you $3,500, you know, to hit 2,000 points and
and just get nerfed.
Exactly. So Kill Team not only provides a low barrier to entry, but to your point, the community is a bit more friendly. Don't get me wrong, there's spectrums inside that community with regards to competitive and so forth, like I mentioned, but my focus is going to be on growing the player base, because I feel we need to get to a point where we have a 2-day tournament and we run some of that flavor beyond than just Swiss that you're talking about.
Absolutely. I want to take a step back to brackets real quick. So
yep, sounds good.
Brackets usually have one overall win. So the reason why you come back to day 2 on brackets is there's a winner in each pod, and each pod you get a prize for winning. So it's basically an incentive system to come back to day 2, because it's like, okay, well, I got into this one. These guys are probably more of my skill level. Let me try to win at my skill level. And I think the thing that I dislike about it is that I felt like when I went to KTO, I felt like I was better. I might not be, but my day 1, I flew really close to the sun, played some really good people, and like Icarus, I burned and I melted. And then I got really unlucky on like my game 2 or something, or my game 4. And I felt like I got locked into a bracket that I felt like I could have been better than. I
Superior?
felt like
no, I feel you though. It
I
does
feel like
feel. I think that's the whole thing that we missed on the bracket. The whole point of the bracket is that, say you group people, and when we call it a pod, like say it'd be like 8 people. So maybe you have 24 people at your tournament, or we'll say it's bigger and you have 64 people, and then you group them into 8 pods. Well, the person who went 0-3 the first day and now is now in the lowest pod, the little carrot to bring them is that, oh, if you go 3-0 though and win your pod on the last day, is that you'll still get a prize for that and something. So it's a reason to incentivize people and to make people like feel like they still have something in it. But I think for a lot of us, if you're like very competitively oriented and you're not in the top pod, you're just like, bleh. Or if you get in a pod that you feel like is below your skill level, then you're like, well, I'm stuck here and all unhappy for the rest of the tournament, you know?
Yeah.
But
like, I think I got stuck at 37th, and that's one reason why is I put in a loss when I should have put in a win. But Android right now with BCP is cancer, and you can't look at your wins and losses. They're just hashtags. So you know, when you put it in, you just don't know.
iPhone preferred. Yep.
Yeah.
BCP.
iPhone, definitely BCP.
Behnz, do you guys use best coast pairings down in, I know there used to be down under pairings, right? But I think they merged together, if you know what I'm talking about. But
yeah, no, that's correct. Yeah, we do use BCP exclusively for.
Yeah. Unfortunately, iPad is a way better format for it. So I knew that when I was in Pod 4, I could never place better than 31st, and that was disappointing to me, right? And I feel like sometimes like that's the detriment of pods, is that you want to go. Like I traveled across the country to play an event to see how well I could do, and I got locked into 39th to 41. Like if I lost every game, like
yeah, so it capped your overall ranking. Like if that's your goal, if you're like, I'd like to make like, if you're like new, you're like, maybe I'd like to make the top half of players, or you say I want to make the top 25% or the top 10% is like a high bar. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then you're limited in that bracket system because you're like, but then again, you could qualify for the top bracket and then lose out completely and get wiped. And you're like, oh, I still got like 8th place in the whole tournament, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
And it's just, I can see why they're trying to get people to come back, but I think that's why kind of cutting people loose and having like another thing, like it doesn't have to be another like cutthroat tournament if you're offering something else on the second day, right? We have like narrative and different styles of events that's like still, is very formatted and it's a tournament, of course, but it's just not like a double dose of the same exact tournament, right?
Agreed. And I think that's one of the biggest of the 2-day tournaments. Some of the best. I think those both formats are very good for 2-day tournaments because they offer a reason to come back to day 2. Like you can come back on the top 8 day, try to win another tournament or play narrative or play something, and you'll be good. Brackets, you can come back. You still have a chance to win your pod. So there's still a reason to play. Swiss is a little bit more difficult to make people want to come back to on day 2, because let's say, unless if they're just trying to see how far they're going to get, because a lot of people will drop last round. A lot of people will, they might not come back at all to day 2 because maybe they lost too much on day 1. And there's no reason to come back. So I feel like that's the negative in Swiss, but the positive of Swiss is that it's a true system to see how well you can place at a tournament outside of drops, right? So like how high can you actually place going to one of these big tournaments, and that you're going to be able to play the entire time in that tournament the entire time. And that's one of the important positives of Swiss. So as a tournament organizer, those are going to be your three main things. One thing we're going to do differently this year at LVO is we're trying something else. I don't even know what to call it. It is a pure Swiss tournament, but it's slightly different. It's like the NFL or like the playoffs. You have
2 divisions, right? AFC, NFC. So it's driven because we have 2 layouts of terrain, right? And that's really the only thing that causes it. It's not driven from a competitive standpoint,
Correct.
But just as a way to guarantee that players get time on both the what do you call it, the Into the Dark layout, or what is the proper name for it?
Into the Dark and Open.
Yep. Which we're going to have both of at LVO this year. Which
we will.
Have we talked about terrain, or where do you want to drive the conversation next, Mr. Dakotah? Because I'd like to hear Behnz's journey and like what it's like getting terrain, down under, and then we've been on such a journey through it too.
Yeah. So first things I want to talk about venues, and then talk about terrain. So as a TO, the next most important thing I think is to think about where are you going to run this tournament and how many people can you have at this tournament. I think in Australia, you guys are probably limited in game stores based on space. In Los Angeles or Southern California, we do have some really big stores, so we can still run 120 person kill team tournament in certain stores, right? Without having to go out and rent something or put a bunch of, because that's the other scary thing is sometimes like you have to put money down to secure a place. And then if you're a store and you're listening to this, then you already have a space and you should know exactly how many. But the other most important thing is to realize how many players can you comfortably have in your store, in your tournament. And that's something that's super important, because when I went to KTO, when I went to BAO or other tournaments, sometimes there's literally not enough space. They overbooked it. They have too many tables, or they didn't, or like FLG didn't offer enough space, right? For that
that's
tournament.
Just every year, man. That's just the normal.
Yeah. So,
and we're talking about just how cramped the conditions are.
Yes.
Like Behnz was alluding earlier to, like, when you have a lot of space between the tables and people have space to put their stuff, like the highest form of it is like what I would call like islanding, where each table is like self-contained and there's space to walk between each table. If you have like a lot of space at a venue where like, and then you can walk the whole way around it and you don't have to go to the end of a row. And then, there's rows with space to place your stuff in between. And then there's edge to edge where there's no place to space your in between, and maybe you can get away with that on kill team because there's still edge like between you and the table, but it just can really vary like the density, and it can have a big impact like on heat and enjoyability and like comfort.
And also if somebody has any disabilities, that's something that also we have to be aware of, right?
100%.
So I think the minimum space that you need to play a game of kill team, the absolute minimum, and some of these tournaments that I said before did not have this amount of space, is at least for 2 players, you need at least 30 by, I would say, 44 inches. So the tables need to be at least 44 inches wide by 30 inches. And that's enough for literally a open board layout right in front of you. And then you both people will have, I don't know, about 15 to 14 inches in front of them. Right. And that's enough to put your tokens, enough to put your notes, maybe one of your books. And that's cramped, right? At KTO, we had 24 by 32 inches. So every single person was sitting right next to each other. Every board was right next to each other lengthwise. And there was no space to put any tokens, no space to put any models. We had to put them in our laps. And that was for 87 players.
Wow.
That is not enough space at all.
Yeah.
I think in like sardines at that point.
Yes.
Go ahead, Dan.
I was just saying it was a similar thing on the Australia Day event when we ran it at the Combat Company. It was a massive learning curve for all of us. We had Yeah, we had 2 boards on a single 40K table, which was a bit cramped as well. And
that is the minimum, though, for sure.
Yeah, people were shoulder to shoulder, but like I said, that was a big learning curve, and we made sure post that every tournament after that would not only have enough, to your point, Dakotah, space on the table for things like tokens, books, TAC Ops cards, to be positioned somewhere, notepads, etc., but also space under the table as well. So if they had bags and so forth, they could come plug it in under. But at the GT, we went all out. So at the GT, they literally had like 2 tables next to each other, where one of those tables was taken up by the board, and they had a table next to them to just throw whatever they wanted on it. And it was, the feedback was huge, because I think
that sounds luxurious.
It was very luxurious. It was very luxurious, and it was a spot where I could just grab my phone camera and just do a video recording, walking up in and through all the aisles, zooming in on some of the tables. So it was a much better situation. But we've got stores here that accommodate everything from, down in Melbourne, plenty of games, 8-man sort of pod tournament, right through to, we're thinking about doing another one shortly, around 30 people inside a store as well. So it all just depends. But to your point, if you're not making the space accessible, tournaments can be a stressful thing enough, let alone to wonder about where to put your models.
So I think it's important, because when people travel to a tournament, they should know they could be packed in like sardines. And while that is okay, you don't know if you're going to retain those people in the future. For instance, if I had to go back to KTO next year, I probably wouldn't, because of the amount of space that I had. Now, if they got rid of the narrative and just expanded the competitive scene and put some people outside, then that might be something worthwhile to go to. If they cut down on the players, then I would go back, because ultimately each one of us would have more space. I think that was like the worst I've ever seen. And BAO, we had all the mats were side by side. So we had 22 inches in between each player. So we were right
they
next
were
to each
side
other.
by side the long way, though, right?
The long way.
Because the most restrictive, which I've seen them only do in the UK for 40K, is when you play edge to edge with the thing, the thin way.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
Actually, we were the other way. We were edge to edge the long way, but we did have a good 12 inches in front of each player this time. So it was better, because we could put our stuff in front of us. We didn't have to have it in our laps.
It's still not a lot of personal space in terms of like elbows.
Correct.
And like heat. And like me, when I game, like my mind is going a million miles per hour. So like I usually like sweat and like my adrenaline, like I'm having time of my life. You know what I mean?
Yelling because you got like the 3 6s in a row,
Yeah. That was earlier today against my girlfriend, and she had the 3 6s. Yeah. Anyway.
So it sounds like in Australia they have a great amount of space for some tournaments, which is nice, but not.
Or you found a really great venue too. It sounds
that
like.
too.
Yeah, and it's not just space, but you're mentioning sweaty, and it just takes me back to the January tournament, because Combat Company is an amazing space, but it's like what you guys would call a Home Depot, where wall to wall miniatures, stacked on shelves, pallets, and everything. But unfortunately, they've only got fans, because it is a like business district. It's got no air conditioning in it. So the Australia Day tournament was a different kind of sweaty. People were literally peeling their shirts off them, because we got really extreme temperatures here in Australia.
Summertime in January.
Correct, right? Mate. So we were roasting. We were roasting. It was a sweaty of a different kind, but sweaty all the same. So yeah.
That's crazy. It's great you were all willing to do that, but yeah, I think air conditioning varies by geography, is what I'm learning as an American. And
true.
Many of the venues we have it here, but not. I mean, we can talk. I guess we're talking venues now, but anyway, Behnz. So, how was the reception from the place you ran the venue? Like, were they happy with the turnout? Like, do you have a great relationship with them?
Yeah.
Are you planning on going back next year? Like, did everything hit off like that? Because, a lot of times in the United States, you'll sign these like multi-year contracts to stay at a place. But anyway, maintaining those relationships with the venue is super important to the longevity of your event, whether it's a local store or a venue. So
no, definitely. We've got some amazing relationships across the country with different stores who support the Kill Team community specifically, which is amazing. And I can't thank those stores enough, but you're 100% right. Having those relationships with those stores, and again, dependent on what they can actually house internally. So even though we ran the GT outside of a gaming store, we still supported that store in a very strong way. Like they provided prize sponsorship, and a massive shout out to Stephen Kishan for supporting us so strong there. But making sure we have those relationships are key, because not only do stores obviously provide an opportunity for us to purchase products from, but when they've got space like that and they hand it over so generously, it's really appreciated. So yeah,
absolutely,
great relationships with the stores here. And when we do run one at a specific venue that isn't a store, they're the first to put up their hands and go, hey, how can we help?
It's amazing. Yeah,
that's
those kind of stores,
man. Yeah, that's amazing.
Those stores are the stores that you want to keep around as well.
Mm.
Yeah, I think that the other thing that I want to talk about venues is that, like, sometimes you can link up with an already established tournament, and you can be like, hey, I want to run Kill Team at, Scorched Earth in Arizona, which we might do next year, but that's still up in the air. Like in Arizona, like, how can we help? Or how can we make this work for both of us, right? And usually you can have like a conversation. So you either got to rent a place, you got to find a gaming store that you can do that will be willing to work with you, or as a gaming store, you already have your venue, and or you can find an outside party that is already running a tournament that you can get in on, right? Those are the three ways. Or, I mean, you could start your own, but that's really ambitious, and probably takes a lot of money up front. So those are some things that you need to definitely keep in mind before you dive full on what kind of tournament you want to run. Let's move on to terrain. So, Behnz, how did you come through to your massive collection of plastic?
It's an addiction, Dakotah. it's a
I mean, we all are addicted to plastic crack. We all are.
This is a different kind of sick to say, because I don't know why. It's just very thematic for me. And some guys spend their money on fast cars. Some guys spend their money on boats and stuff. I spend my money on plastic terrain, and I've just been collecting boxed sets ever since. And look, in all honesty, when I ran my first tournament, I had enough basically to host it all myself. I didn't have to reach out to anyone and borrow anything. And since there, it's been an absolute snowball effect where I've got enough terrain to probably run easily a 100-man GT now, which is great. But I genuinely love the flavor that different terrain brings into the mix. So I've got Octarius boxes, I've got Morok, Narkman, Chalnath. I even went after some Vertigus terrain that you get in the previous Command Edition, because I think that's very good. And
yes, definitely.
Focused most of my layouts on the Worlds of Warhammer maps and the map pack that came out with that. So 5 to 6 pieces
Those are great maps.
5 to 6 heavy, 5 to 6 light, and I bought 5 Battle Sanctums, Basilicanums for the statues and so forth. But I literally just went a bit crazy on it. And honestly, I love the flavor it brings to the game. And I know in a lot of instances, a lot of people are like, Chalnath, is a little bit challenging, and Morok is a little bit janky in terms of, what's obscuring and what's not. But I think Terrain just brings its flavor to the game. And when you've got people like Turning Point Tactics and a few others putting out map packs that let people, run some really competitive layouts over just what comes inside the box, meeting expectations. And that's been a flavor that I've heard throughout the entire conversation here with regards to, pairings, pods, etc. When people come to a tournament, they expect a premium experience, and that's what I aim to deliver them. So beyond the terrain, how everything's set up, even to I went a little bit extra and actually had plastic overlays on the cardboard boards this time. So all the objective markers were actually stickers that were stuck down to the perspex, the acrylic, and all the drop zones were measured out. Deployment was measured out. Center lines were measured out. So again, when you're in a tournament, and to your point, Elliot, when your mind's racing, to try and make it as easy as possible for people, to have all of that considered helps them a lot and actually reduces playtime. So yeah, from the terrain to everything else, I'm infatuated with terrain. And Dakotah, in all honesty, I drool at some of your terrain that you've got on your store, especially the Necron ones. So, that whole thematic where they light up, where it gives the players an understanding that it's more than just painting models and rolling some dice. They come, and each round is almost a little story. Is why I'm addicted to terrain, because I want to provide people that experience. And when I actually send out feedback forms, post events, and encourage
that's something you can do as a TO, right, for free, like on Google Docs. If you have the emails of all the people, a week after the event, you send out a list to them. It brings them just to a one-click survey, and they can give you some honest. That's going to be the most valuable information. But anyway, go ahead. Anybody can do it though for free. It's a tool we all have, and why not get that from the people?
Google Forms too. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So terrain for me is king. Also a really, really bad addiction. So whenever I post whip photos on Wednesdays, it's 90% of the time terrain. So I just acquired it over a period of time. It was really funny because when I went to send a friend of mine a link or a screenshot to Amazon's Nachmund so he could buy a set for himself, it's set up in the top left-hand corner, purchased 7 times, and then that wasn't even the boxes I bought secondhand on Facebook Marketplace and so forth. So it was just really evident that how addicted I am, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, the terrain sets the vibe, right, guys? More than anything, it helps the immersion. Like, there's nothing more fun than having a table together that has a cohesive theme, and then walking by and 2 people that put time into their kill teams are like battling on it, and you're just like, it's picture perfect, right? It's I think it's the most fun you can have.
Pretty much for myself as a tournament organizer, I am not I don't have a lot of money, right? And a lot of tournament organizers don't, or when they start, they don't. Luckily, I have a laser cutter, and I was injured for a while, so I had a plethora of time to design terrain, and I made a bunch out of MDF, and I tried to make them after I got feedback from the very first LVO from Sheldon's tournament. I designed new pieces to make it better, and we did the same this year. So we have new pieces coming out. But I think that...
And that's how we run LVO, right? So our entire collection, essentially at this point, we do have some Games Workshop Into the Dark.
Yes.
But we have... Lester's Workshop Into the Dark, and just the traditional terrain layout that we used last year on the open table with the containers and the pillars and the walls and barriers and stuff like that.
Yeah, we're going to be getting rid of 1 container on this year. So maximum you can ever have on a board is probably just going to be 1, because containers still to this day are not good.
Chunky boys. Yeah, they're big. And there's something that we just like, for context, we used them a lot in the previous editions, and they just haven't.
They were great for Kill Team 1, but not great for this edition. That leads me back to the same exact feedback that I have for all of Games Workshop terrain. The reason why I don't like a lot of their terrain is because it's too big. The reason why, Turning Point Tactics and these other people say that you should only have 4 to 6 heavy pieces of terrain on the table is because they are limited to the size of Games Workshop terrain. Ultimately, I think that having more heavy on the board is better, but they need to be smaller. And that is something that as an organizer and as a terrain maker, I can do. I can make smaller buildings. I can make smaller, heavy objects, right? I can do these things because I'm not limited to the size and scope of what Games Workshop says is good for the game. And ultimately, the thing that is I view important is I think there are pieces of Chalmeth that are amazing. I think there are pieces of Knockmund that are amazing, of Octarius, of all these different types of terrain. But when you put them all together on the same board, they don't look great. So what I try to do and strive with LVO's format is to take different options from different
like terrain
styles, add
giving
them together.
A unified aesthetic, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it looks like it's one table versus. I mean, some of the heights can be a little challenging too. Like Behnz, how do you guys treat like the tall stuff? Like if you have like Chalmeth. What's like a pharaonic furnace or whatever? Like how tall is that, homie? Like how do you guys treat climbing that ladder? Like.
Well, it again depends on what people are used to. Look, climbing that ladder, again, it's what we run inside tournaments is like just 2 inches to get to the top because it is a ladder. So it's almost like going up a hatch, etc.
Yeah, like it has a, exactly. I know,
Yeah, no,
so happy you said that.
No, definitely, because it's all about like sticking with the theme of the game. In some instances, I've been fortunate enough to grab a few modular pieces from Chalnath as well, so I can stack like 3 high. And when we do that, especially with like the Battle Sanctum, so the Battle Sanctum's like 2 stories, but up the top. So if you've got climbing equipment, you can get from the bottom to the top because there's no hatch. Easily if you've got climbing equipment, and then from there it's a second circle of movement to get to the top floor where you've got punishing vantage upon a punishing vantage even, and that just adds different flavor to the game. But making sure it's common sense, so when people turn up they're not trying to second guess anything, is really, really part of the experience.
It's interesting you mentioned punching vantage. It's one thing that we definitely do not have in the United States. It's pretty much
banned.
Yeah, we don't play with it. But that's the cool thing about when you travel to different countries as well. Playing on a good Chalnath board is so amazing because that terrain is the coolest and the prettiest terrain in the game, hands down.
The straight up Sector Imperialis ruins, right? Is that what
we're talking? Yeah. That is
correct.
That is why I designed like an MDF terrain to kind of emulate Chalnath, but I designed it off of the old Cities of Death terrain. So like, it's cool to go to different scenes and see how they build maps and see how they do stuff, because even in Spain, I'm pretty sure Spain, their thing is that they don't like a lot of heavy terrain in the beginning of the map. They'd rather have more protected deployment zones and have more fighting go on in the middle, rather than in America, we kind of like heavy terrain in the center and less protected deployment zones. But you still want some absolute protection. So it's very interesting, fascinating how the metas develop in different countries as well. But that's besides the point. We're getting away from TO stuff. So outside of a massive budget, how would you guys suggest people develop terrain or get a lot? Because that's one of the other biggest things is, how do I get enough people to come to my event and have enough terrain to run it, right? And that's one of the biggest hurdles that you have to do. Like me, I have a laser cutter. I had to buy a bigger one. And for you bands, you have an addiction, so you're good.
Yeah, I think one thing to keep in mind is that terrain exists already in the community. And maybe it won't be perfect, But the most accessible way, if you're like, yo, I want to get involved, and I think there's people that would come to it thing if I set it up, like you can go to your local store that has some terrain there and just use their stuff, right?
Mhm.
Just to get your feet off the ground. And like if you're a local store and you're like, we sell a lot of Kill Team, we have a lot of people that buy the product, like I think people would come to events. Like you can reach out and look for and like ask on Facebook groups or something like that, or to find somebody who wants to be like the ambassador, you know what I mean? Who wants to run the tournament, and you can work out like a deal with them. Like if you want to give them a store discount or something, if they're going to bring a lot of people in, you know what I mean? But anyway, there's like a symbiotic relationship between the stores. And I think that's the first way, right? So you don't have to buy any of your own. And, I think you can go Behnz route where you just buy all the super high end, super expensive GW stuff and collect mass amounts of it over time.
Or you can spend the same amount of money on lasers and spend way more time.
No. Or the MDF though, right, is going to give you the most volume for your money, right? It's the most cost effective. And like, I think we can tell with your stuff, it's looking good, right? So like,
real good.
It doesn't have to be like a huge, like compromise, right? Because you can get a lot of it. And Behnz, how do you found the access down there? Because like I'm like you, like I bought like 12 sets of Shawanoth, like from somebody that parted it out on eBay, just the terrain when it dropped. Dude, I got it I think for like maybe $57 a set for the terrain.
Right. I literally picked up a set of Octarius last night for $50. Like
yes, right.
on
so
Facebook Marketplace.
50 Australian, that's an even better deal, right?
Yeah, exactly. But look, I think just going back to your comment, Dakotah, I think TOEO, like tournament, the second word is organization. I mean, if somebody in the community, to both your points, is able to coordinate with a group of people who each have a set of terrain and they want to get their feet wet in the TO scene, just reach out to those people, say, hey, we're getting together, bring your terrain, we're going to set up like a 3-round tournament, just to kind of kick it and see how it all goes. I think that's the best way for people to bring people together and make people feel a part of something and get a tournament happening. And I know some of the guys down our way are thinking about doing that as well, but to do it, organization's a big thing. In a lot of instances, it feels like it's a too hard basket because people don't want to get organized or they think it's too hard. But Elliot, you said it perfectly before. If you're thinking about doing it, put your hand up. Dakotah, you said, even if you don't want to volunteer, I mean, if everybody comes together, magic can happen. Like I've seen it happen.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, it's
there's 2 other ways for this terrain thing to happen. One is to run your 3D printer for 6 months straight. That is a possibility.
That is just going to be such a more viable thing that never existed, but it's so true. I mean, I know people that have run events like the Renegade up here in Minneapolis. They have like 3 printers running all the time. And there's been other events that have successfully just had somebody in the organization who was willing to print kind of year round and was able to provide like an incredible volume of high quality 3D printed terrain, So, I mean,
another good option is, this is the most sketchy option, is to use store terrain. And the reason why that's the sketchiest one is Kill Team terrain, I find, is you have to have a certain kind of terrain. Not all 40K terrain is good for Kill Team. Not all Infinity terrain is good for Kill Team. Not all Necromunda terrain is good for Kill Team, right? It does require very specific types of terrain. And I feel like as a store or as a TO, sometimes you have to be wary about some of the terrain that you're going to get. And that's why like some of those Turning Point Tactics things, or like if you have a couple sets, I know there's quite a few people that have quite a few sets of mine, they look forward to different things, like having a map pack and being able to design stuff around those dimensions. That's why I always provide my dimensions in case if somebody, is out there making cardboard stuff. doing the hobby hero stuff, because you can do that too. It's just like, if you're going to play on cardboard terrain, it probably should not be an expensive tournament. Half the reason why you charge what you do is because you're offering value and the reason to come to your tournaments. If all of your stuff is made of cardboard, it's very much not as strong of a reason to come. I think that we should move into kind of like some of the pricing points and some of the financial things of what we do and think of as successful tournaments. Behnz, what do you think of as a successful tournament for yourself financially?
Financially, look, I haven't even thought about like that yet, because what I hope to do first and foremost is provide people attending with an awesome time. Whether, obviously, I don't want to run in the red in any way. I want it to be something that's self-sustainable, and hopefully something I can recoup some of my terrain costs on. But what I do in the first instance, from a financial perspective, from a prize pool perspective, is make sure that there's something in it for everyone. So
Agreed.
whether you're coming there and winning first, second, or third, I was speaking to a friend of mine just yesterday, Kevin, who said, I'd love, even if I didn't win anything, if I turned up and I walked away with something like a little piece of memorabilia, to your point, and I could take something home like a dice tray or something like that, or objective markers, like that'd be enough for me. And, we run things like lucky door prizes that are randomly done outside of who places first, second, third, outside of best painted, outside of best sportspersonship, and outside of wooden spoon, which is here last in Australia. So the person who comes last gets given the wooden spoon. It's a thing throughout all sports here. But outside of that, there's anywhere between 2 to 4 lucky door prizes, which could be store vouchers, which could be a number of different things. But that's what we try and do. And the focus, again, first and foremost, beyond everybody having a good time, is just at the very least breaking even. That's what we've been able to do the last couple of tournaments. Hopefully, going forwards, the community started to not only mature a bit, but people's understanding of what they can expect when they turn up to one of my tournaments. There's a lot of value in it, so maybe potentially we can look at increasing the ticket prices a little bit and then providing more back to the community. So again, from my perspective, not run in the red, yay, but to make sure it's an exceptional experience and hopefully something that can be self-sustaining going forwards is first and foremost.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe to run a little profit, like you were saying, just so that you can, continue to reinvest in the terrain and stuff like that and grow it. Like I don't know, we've never planned to like have the same number of people year to year. You know what I mean? Like we always want to grow, right? Like that's the whole thing. Like with the differential, it's like you're either growing or getting smaller, right? And
I think another big point is this is a little bit of the harder subject to talk about, is that no one wants to make money or is like out there to make money, other than if you're like some of these really big organizations, right? But unfortunately, this is a business and people have to make money at this to continue on. And I see a lot of tournament organizers that come and go, or they disappear because it's just a money sink for them. And eventually they either get burned out or there's no reason to continue doing it. And you have to find what is going to help. Like if you have a really nice, cushy job and this is your way to give back to community, then that's awesome. Like we're very glad to have you in the community. If you view this is going to be like your job in the future, I would definitely say, hold up.
I mean,
wait a minute.
Like,
it's not the case.
Widespread in the US, TOs are not paid, right? It's just like not really a thing. And so it's like,
which is a crime in my opinion.
Yeah. And I hope that will change someday, and that hopefully with like I think that the biggest events would like to see that happen someday, because I think Magic is at least able to reward them. I don't know if they pay their people, but they gave them incentives and stuff. And maybe some of the higher level judges, I don't know the whole thing, but I know that if you do like a sport, the refs are paid, right? And stuff like that.
Even if it's small, something small, like if you're like an overarching organization and you have all these TOs that are volunteering their time. There are a lot of people that just want to volunteer, and that's all great and everything. But some of these people would like even if it was like $100 or $50, $80, like something. It's really important to give back to these people, because sometimes you will have these really great people in the community that burn out, or they just get sick of it, and then you never see them again, or they just go and become a player, right? It's important to price your tournaments accordingly so that you can, firstly, not run in the red.
It has to be sustainable, right?
Yeah. Secondly, recoup some costs. Yeah. Even if you're not paying for yourself for your time, at least try to make it so that you're not losing money. Last year we were in the red on every single tournament except for AVTT and All Valley, right? All Valley Team Tournament and Las Vegas. This year we are doing better, but in the same aspect, right? Like, you can only get in those green numbers if you're encouraging more and more people to come. It's a very double-edged sword. You have to be able to provide an experience that people will want to pay for and come to and come back over and over and over. But this is not a main job, because ultimately, like, you can't pump the same people for money every single month, it's impossible, unless if you're running a TO for multiple events. So it is something that's important to think about. If you're trying to make this a job, don't quit your job to do it, because you probably won't be successful.
Yeah. And I mean, you do a lot with the terrain though, right? The fact that you manufacture your own. So for you,
so one of the reasons why I can do it.
Yeah, running the events is just an element of your business, right?
Correct. Yeah, and providing a good experience is probably the most important aspect, because in the end, being profitable will come with running a good event or running multiple good events, right? Being profitable should be a goal, but it shouldn't be the main goal, in my opinion. If you are running good tournaments, you will attract more people and you will become more profitable in general.
And I mean, I think personally, like, I don't know, Behnz, have you thought a lot about this, or how do you view this? Is this like, if you can break even? I guess when I look at the large organizations, like in like the United States, which would be like Adepticon, Nova, and LVO, like I think that Adepticon is run as like a not for profit status or something, and they have a few people, because it's so large now, that like work on it full time, but they're not like a statement that like makes profit. And I know Nova is a charity, and the Las Vegas Open is run by Frontline Gaming, which is like privately owned by the people that made the company,
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I've felt like their approach to just sort of like American like commercialism and just like go out there and go out there and sell it, is like been the reason that their event has grown like at such a faster rate than like the other events, you know what I mean? And that
totally agree.
Their profit like fuels them to have greater and greater events, essentially. Yeah. And they're like the biggest. And so I've kind of embraced that about them, but also I'm an American, like, so I'm just okay with that, I guess.
Yeah,
I think go ahead.
I was just gonna quickly answer, because that's a very good point. So I run everything like a business, but everything I make in terms of profit or even outside of that, I pull back into the community. So I've actually explored looking at it from a not-for-profit perspective, but essentially running it like a community non-for-profit. But there's different regulations here in Australia with regards to that.
And you may like qualify for those without like stretching the rules or anything. And they certainly have in the United States. I know it's 2 different countries, but we have similar systems, it sounds like, where, that's definitely an option. But it's just interesting that we have kind of different setups here for how all of our big events work. Because like Nova, for example, gives away all of its like profit at the end of every year, essentially.
To a charity.
So, yep.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Now, Behnz, I know you have to go.
Sorry.
So, no, you're good. Go ahead. Let's give a couple shout outs and then we'll finish up without you and give a good shout out to the Australian scene.
Oh, look, again, massive shout out to Screech, Jay, Emma, Jono, a few other people like Combat Company, RC Crew, plenty of games in Victoria, Good Games. Massive shout out to all those organizations and everybody who's been supporting us since the get-go. Thanks so much, guys.
Behnz, I appreciate you. I know this is a long one. Thanks for jumping on with us, man. And I hope you have a good rest of your day. Tell your family that we said hello and hope they have a good day from the Kill Team community across the seas.
Thanks so much, guys. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, brother.
Bye.
Bye. So, Elliot, I think that's a good point. That is one reason why FLG has expanded so much, right?
I think that's part of it, and that's why I've always loved, like I do my TOing on a volunteer status, right? So like that's why I've always loved like volunteering for them, because I've seen that all the success they've had, and they seem so ambitious to want to continue to do it. You know what I mean? And I think that they're kind of leading the way and showing like how much demand there is out there to have lots of people get together and do tabletop war gaming.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the best things of FLG is that they're providing something to this community that we all desperately need. And when Games Workshop kind of left us in the dust back in like 2010, decided not to run any tournaments, FLG kind of stepped into their place and was able to, with the ITC, able to continue on and make things better and bigger. And they aren't really TOs at this point, right? They're event organizing, right? And they depend on us TOs to organize events, to grow them to bigger and bigger and bigger, like we all want to have every year, right? So that's one thing that's really helpful for us, especially us being affiliate with them, is that we are able to capture a little bit of those sales and make it a little bit more reasonable for us to run tournaments through FLG. So that is one of the biggest things and best things I think that they've recently put in, at least for now. Going on to like player engagement and kind of keeping player retention, Behnz said a couple great things where you kind of want to make sure that all players either go home with something so they can then remember the event, or
at least have the opportunity to win something. Like he was saying, like having 4 door prizes, which if you don't know how that works, it's just we pull somebody's name out of a hat. You can either do it during the tournament in the middle of things, or you can do it at the end after everybody, who has prizes. You could pull it 4 times, and people who didn't get any award, it's just like you have a chance to win just by being there. And it
absolutely,
and it adds to a little fun because you could just walk away with something, and it's not based on like performance or painting or any type of thing. It's just for attending the event that you have a chance to win something.
Yeah, absolutely. I think another really important aspect of it too, right, is also the financial viability of it, right? So like when we talk about prizes, right? So a lot of times you're paying to run a tournament somewhere, or at least a portion of ticket sales, or you're not, or it's up to the store. Maybe you're working with the store and the store's taking on all the cost, right? But sometimes the store isn't going to be willing to donate a prize for that. So if you have a 3D printer, you have the ability to access anything else, or take donations on the side so that you can offer certain things or make things for players, because in the end, your creativity is the only thing that can limit you. And that's one thing that I've always said is your creativity is going to make you successful or not. And we're all in a creative environment. We're all in a creative process in this team. So you just have to take that conversion process or that painting process and apply it to being a TO. how can you make extra measurement gauges or extra, objective markers, so that you can maybe give those out, right? Like,
yeah, and I think that's something that like there's definitely like some thrifty options where you could either 3D print, say for Warhammer 40K themed purity seals and like give them to somebody, or there's ways to make them, or something that you can like kind of mass produce that's unique to your event that somebody can take away and either hang up on the wall in their hobby room, or if it's an actual game made, like another thing you could make would be like little measuring tools or something.
mm-hmm.
Or if you've got enough like ticket sales coming in where you can budget for some of this, you can place orders to these, vendors on Etsy and have custom stuff made for your event, right? Like where you could have little tools and stuff made that says, oh, you got your little 3-2-1, and then it's got your event on it. And that's a great way to promote your event because people will continue to use those things, and it helps get the word out about it, and it's something to start a conversation.
If you're not locked into a store, you can also, like, if you run multiple events at different stores, right? Because I know Behnz is saying that, he does a lot of stuff through different stores. That's something that we do. If you're not locked into a store, sometimes you can get donations from other stores for your tournaments. And some of these donations, whether it be dice, laser pointers, laser lines, plastic, all sorts of stuff, you can try to get some of these things into the hands of your players at these events. So there are affordable and viable ways, but one of the things is just how are you going to it requires work. Like a lot of people like want to run an event and not do the work. And ultimately your event's not going to work. Like I've seen a lot of TOs come and go that don't put the extra effort into rules packets, what they expect their players to do, their terrain packets. They just kind of show up and they just throw terrain on a table and, pray to the emperor and hope it works. I haven't seen any one of those TOs stick around or succeed. The more work you put in, the more people are going to see that, and the more people are going to appreciate you, and see what you do for the community. So it's kind of like how much effort you want to put in, right? When you're when you're playing D&D, you kind of know when the DM has run out of ideas, right? And you're like, okay, well, let's help them along. Or compared to a DM that seems like they have everything always constantly prepared. And you're like, wow, like I just did this. And like, wow, this is cool. Like it's that same kind of vibe.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's important because like the community is either growing or dying, right? So if you have like that local dynamic where things are surging, they're like going to stay in that trend and continue to surge. You know what I mean? Versus if you lose that momentum and like less games are being played in your community, like week to week, you know what I mean? It's just not going to sustain. I was just really impressed what Behnz had to say because it sounds like they were hitting it like at every single avenue. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That like they had flyers in stores, they were at all the stores, they had good relationships in different regions, like they had a strong Discord community, they are reaching out to people on Facebook as well. It's like I think those are like your three big like life veins to like visibility and stuff. And
there's one more aspect,
like a podcast, but
there's one more aspect that you can do. You can reach out to content creators. Not all content creators are as cool about working with you without cost, right? Because ultimately, like, content creation is a business. You have to pay, right? So like, you can reach out to different Kill Team content creators and maybe they'll do shout outs for free. Maybe they'll charge. Sometimes that marketing is you're going to see more of an, I wish Sheldon was here because he could tell us.
Maybe they'll attend your event, right? Like,
yeah.
I mean, anything's possible. And
I mean, I think Battle Brothers Ben from Battle Brothers Tabletop is going to come to LVO. So if you guys are a big fan of him, he's going to be there. But like,
yeah, they have amazing amazing content. It's highly produced.
Yeah,
in a fantastic way. So
some people you see at tournaments or go to tournaments, right? Or content creators are there to help with their content creation. You know, I think like I've never reached out to Miniac. You know, I know that Kill Team Open has. I know that there's a bunch of other ways that you can also promote events and grow bigger as well. So that's a good point that you brought up. That
Miniac and I go to the same Raising Canes.
Do you really?
So
nice.
There's a chance that I may see him someday, and I'll be like, "Hey, bro, I watch you on YouTube."
And he'd be like, "Dope."
I mean, I would love to. I think the only thing that's going to stop that, unfortunately, like from him attending LVO, right, is that he did attend LVO last year, and he and Ninjon had their own like painting class get together. Mm-hmm. So, like if maybe he'd have time to like stop by, like, but I think he had great success and a lot of fun doing that. So I can see him wanting to spend his LVOs that way in the future. You know what I mean? Yeah, but anyway, there's so many other great.
Dude, I saw. Speaking of LVO, it was so cool. I don't know if you guys got to talk to him, but I got to talk to Duncan Rhodes for a while, and he was fawning over the terrain and stuff. We had a really good chat. Yeah. He was
out walking around and being with the mortal people and being super
chill.
Yeah, super nice to everybody.
Yeah, he was really, really cool. I got to chat with the Play on Tabletop guys for a while. They really like to train, and they're asking about it for their channel, and a few other people like I think Mini Wargamers Basement. I can't think of it at the moment. But yeah, like content creators are just like us, you know, like they're just dudes and chicks, and they might be willing, especially if they're local, to help out, shout out your events, especially if they're involved in the scene, you know. So it's always worth reaching out. Isn't definitely never bad.
and being aware of who's in your community, right? You never know. Like it's worth getting to know a little bit about them, because we're lucky in the Midwest here that we've got like several throughout, you know, like Minnesota and Wisconsin. We've got Uncle Adam, Goobertown, Ninjon, and Miniac, at least just between these two states. So, you know, if you're you never know who's nearby, right?
Yeah, there's a couple other things that is, you know, like when you're a TO, you're going to meet other TOs. So you can, like, for instance, I'll shout out like the Bay Area. We have the Bats who run tournaments. You have John who runs Acadia's Fight Club, I believe, up in Sacramento. We have, you know, Travis Chang who runs the New York Open in November. So if you're on the East Coast, that's a great event. They had a great success last year. They'll have great success this year. So, you know, like getting your events
small, right? And even in the US, it's like, it seems like everybody kind of knows each other. So if you're running a decent sized GT in a regional tournament and you're not engaged on these people with Discord and stuff, I mean, I think it's worth getting connected, because when your event becomes known amongst these communities, like we have a growing number of people in Kill Team who are willing to travel to events, right? And it's always just been growing and growing since the beginning. So there's more likely that if people know you're going to have a good sized tournament, that people that have to drive 5 hours or take a flight or something, they might attend it if it seems like it's going to be a great event. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like
it just shows our maturity that we have more people willing to come out to a place like Las Vegas, you know, and fly across the country to attend a convention. But it's such an experience, right? I mean, that's why we do it year to year.
I mean, one of the other good things is that we, you know, there's like, we can also shout out other TOs that are doing great things in the community, like Kill Team Cascadia up in Oregon and Seattle. right? They run a bunch of tournaments every year. If you're in their area, make sure you join up in their Discord. They have a lot of tournaments every year. You have Six-Sided Legion in like the Minnesota area. That's where you are, right? Minnesota, Michigan.
Yeah, yep. I'm in the Minnesota region, so I'll give a shout out to Jay Free here in Minneapolis, running a really thriving kill team community out of the old Fantasy Flight building up in Roseville, Minnesota. It's just about 15 minutes from my place here, and it's called Game Center now, like with a Z, Game Center.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a great
I've
place.
Talked to Jay before. I think so.
Yeah, he was at LVO last year, so you probably have for sure.
Yeah.
And super nice guy, doing a lot for the community.
Is it Jay Fay? Jason?
Yep.
Fay?
Yep.
Jason Fay? Yeah, he does. He's on the same podcast with Travis Chang. They do the Just Another Kill Team podcast. I just made a couple gauges for them to sponsor their podcast. You can get them for like 75% off on my Etsy.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, yep, he attended LVO last year. I'd absolutely love it.
It's funny. Jason he won my Eldar. He won my Eldar terrain from the Las Vegas raffle.
Yeah, I wasn't there when you raffled it off.
Yeah,
that's awesome. But anyway, he's doing a lot. Really, just doing everything that I think Behnz was talking about. Just running a thriving Discord. Continuously attending these weekly events where it's just he's going to be there supporting the community and building the backbone and teaching new people how to play. Mm-hmm. And they'll have 20 people show up for open gaming night. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was super impressed with Behnz because of how much effort he's put in. He put in years worth of work before he even ran his first tournament. That's impressive.
Yeah, he really did everything. I don't know how much more
that's why
promotion you could do without taking out paid ads on Facebook and doing targeted things and spending a bunch of money that which can be very expensive, by the way. You know,
absolutely.
It's not normal for a Warhammer tournament to do that type of advertising normally.
Also, I would like to finally shout out Plasma Spam on the East Coast. They do a lot of good stuff. And Ben, he's running a bunch of good stuff down in Florida. And then we also have Chase, who runs stuff in Texas. So there's a lot of really good people. And like I said,
in a big metro region in the United States, there's probably somebody organizing something of a good size in your community. If that sounds like something that would be fun, find them. Using social media probably is the easiest way, right? I think
absolutely.
So. Most tournaments have to have some sort of Facebook presence, and it can be that's the only reason I got back on Facebook, was just to be able to find the local tournaments, really,
Mm-hmm.
And it worked great.
Yeah. Is there any other events that you're going to be attending this year, Elliot?
I think I'll be attending the Games Workshop US Open in Tampa Bay later this year in the fall. I'll be at the Renegade Open here in November. And I think that'll be it. And then, of course, I'll be at the Las Vegas Open, January 19th, 20th, and 21st or something like that?
Yep.
I think so.
I think we'll be there on the 18th setting up. So if you guys want to come by, say hello, and then have us all go watch the reveal show, should be a blast. So.
Definitely.
But yeah, is there anything else you want to shout out, Elliot, before we sign off?
No, just shout out to all the TOs throughout the community. I know it's sometimes a thankless job, but thank you to everybody out there who supports it. And I think we all feed off of each other's energy and just continue to try to build this community together,
Absolutely. I'd like to shout out our Twitch. Check us out on Tuesday nights. Sometimes we play games. Sometimes we stream painting. We're going to be doing a whole bunch of different stuff this year, so.
Sick, man. I'll have to check it out. I'll have to jump on chat, dude, and hobby alongside.
Hell yeah. So. All right, guys. We'll be signing off, and until next time, peace out. That's one reason why FLG has hold on.
Ouch. Heard that from here.